Minasan konnichiwa, this is Matt Okahara from the Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps, and in this upload we're going to be looking at samurai policing and law enforcement during the feudal era of Japanese history. Ever since I was young, I've had an interest in law enforcement. My father was a police officer, and I was a police officer in the UK as well for 11 years. However, I have since moved to Japan, and my focus has shifted onto samurai history and in particular Hōjutsu, or the way of the gun. But still maintaining a keen interest in law enforcement, I've decided to do this upload and look into the law enforcement of feudal Japan. After the Warring States era had come to an end and the country had unified, the vast samurai armies that fought on the battlefield fell into civil roles. Ostensibly, the purpose of the samurai had not changed. Their purpose was to serve society, and to serve the daimyo, or lord. While some samurai maintained military positions, others took on civil positions. These roles were all necessary for the decent running of society. Not only did it help maintain order, but it also meant that the samurai system, or the Confucius system, which saw the samurai at the top, maintained their position of power over the population. Known as dōshin, the samurai that were assigned to policing duties were in many cases regarded as lower class samurai, certainly below the military. Along with their patrolling responsibilities, the dōshin were assigned with investigations and apprehending criminals. They would often conduct these investigations by interviewing people who were involved or suspected to have been involved in a crime. And if necessary, they would then apprehend the suspect and bring them back to the magistrate for trial. These major tasks were often overseen by yōriki, higher class samurai. But they also had to act as mediators, their responsibilities extending to the marketplaces and shops of Japan. They were required by the magistrate to resolve civil disputes between business owners. And this is why it was often seen as a job of last resort for someone with samurai status. Dealing with the trials and tribulations of the general public was not seemly for someone of such a high rank. The dōshin were often assisted in their responsibilities. Professional police officers known as chōnin would often assist their samurai counterparts. And in many instances, the police officers would help form networks of spies and informants. Many of these informants were themselves former criminals who had come to some sort of arrangement with the police in order to be let off. Whereas other informants were on the payroll of the yōriki and the dōshin. Those men charged with law enforcement were therefore deeply integrated into their communities. It made them easier to carry out their duties, and it also made it easier for society to report their suspicions or misgivings when they came across them. This also meant that community punishments were possible for lesser crimes. The dōshin had authority to issue physical chastisements, as well as the authority to implement house arrest. They were also able to issue fines or insist that compensation be paid. It was not unheard of for samurai to give out fines in order to supplement their own personal income, their policing role not generating very much revenue at all for them. Usually assigned to a specific district and wearing attire to mark them out as dōshin, these samurai, along with their chōnin assistants, could possibly be regarded as one of the first professional police forces in the world. Being samurai, the dōshin of course were equipped with swords. Typically this would be a katana and a wakizashi. And these swords would be carried in tandem in what is sometimes called the daisho configuration, or big little. The dōshin, however, had access to other kinds of weaponry because they were not required to kill people, they were required to apprehend them and bring them before the magistrate for questioning. One of the most common tools for apprehending someone was a length of rope. Once the offender was subdued, willingly or otherwise, the dōshin or yōriki would bind them and bring them before the magistrate. The jutte was also a common weapon. Essentially, it was the samurai equivalent of a baton, and just like in modern times, it could be used to strike the opponent. Finally, there were various kinds of sasumata, which were pole-like weapons used to immobilize individuals. Sometimes included with the feudal-era police are the Shinsengumi. Similar to the dōshin, they were a trained body of men in uniform. But they did not carry out a policing role, they were more of an internal security force. Unlike the dōshin and yōriki who comprised of the police forces, the Shinsengumi responded to the needs of the Tokugawa shogunate. They did not respond to the needs of the community by, for example, resolving civil disputes. And they did not carry out patrols to ensure the good order of society. Their patrols were more or less carried out to ensure that the Tokugawa shogunate maintained a grip on society, and so in that respect they can be regarded more as a paramilitary force than a police force. Formed in 1864 and then disbanded in 1868 at the end of the feudal era, the Shinsengumi were characterized by their strength of character and their skill at arms. Their force would only select the very best, and this is where the term Shinsengumi comes from, the newly selected force. If someone was found guilty of a capital offence, then in all likelihood they themselves would be executed. Depending on the status of the condemned person, the execution would either be carried out by a dōshin or samurai, or by a kamono, a low-class police officer. Whereas a magistrate could prescribe execution for a commoner, only the daimyo or lord could prescribe execution for a samurai. Of course, after the Meiji Restoration, the age of the samurai came to an end, and the Imperial Japanese police force was formed. Initially, this was modelled on the police forces found in France and Prussia. However, after the 1877 Satsuma Rebellion, the police force also took on a more militaristic role. These various policing units existed until the end of World War II. It wasn't until 1953 that the Japanese were once again able to establish their own police force and start enforcing their own laws without international assistance. In modern Japan, policing is carried out by prefecture. This means that each county, or prefecture, has a chief officer. And beneath this officer there are district officers and so on. The prefectural police forces are all overseen by the National Police Agency. The National Police Agency, however, has no operational police officers. There is an exception, however, as those officers who make up the Imperial Guard are all drawn from the National Police Agency. Just like their samurai ancestors, therefore, the modern police of Japan are required to conduct patrols, conduct investigations, and apprehend criminals. The police forces of modern Japan are also required to carry out dynamic interventions in high-risk situations, and this task normally falls to the Special Assault Team. Most prefectures maintain a cadre of officers who are trained in special techniques. These techniques could be used in hostage situations as well as high-risk terrorist situations. Fortunately, Japan maintains a very low crime rate. However, the Japanese police maintain this capability in order to respond to high-risk situations wherever they may occur on the Japanese islands. I hope you've enjoyed this upload about Japanese law enforcement during the samurai era, also touching on some of the modern policing. In the future, along with my Hōjutsu or Way of the Gun uploads, I hope to upload videos about other topics, all relating to Japan and the lesser known parts of Japan.